It's one of the oldest products in human history. It survived the fall of empires. It outlasted kings, wars, and entire civilizations. Soldiers drank it to survive. Doctors used it to heal. Sailors relied on it to stay alive at sea. And it was probably discovered by a mistake nobody meant to make. How could something this ordinary have such an extraordinary history? Stick with me, because we're about to travel across ancient civilizations, battlefields, royal kitchens, and long sea voyages before uncovering how one distant country quietly made this everyday product part of its national food culture. That product is vinegar. So where did vinegar actually come from? The truth is, nobody knows for certain. And that's part of the mystery. Most historians believe vinegar wasn't invented on purpose. It was discovered by accident. Here's the simple science behind it. When wine or fruit juice is left exposed to air for too long, wild bacteria get in. Those bacteria feed on the alcohol and turn it into acetic acid. That sour, sharp liquid is vinegar. In other words, vinegar is simply wine that went wrong. Except it didn't go to waste. Ancient people tasted it, and instead of throwing it away, they found a use for it. This is where the story takes an interesting turn. Because vinegar wasn't just discovered once. Historians believe it was discovered independently in multiple parts of the world. Different cultures, different continents, stumbling onto the same sour accident. Let's start in ancient Mesopotamia. Some of the earliest written records of vinegar come from this region, dating back thousands of years. Ancient Mesopotamians used it for flavoring food and preserving other ingredients. In a world without refrigeration, preservation wasn't a luxury. It was survival. Vinegar helped stop food from spoiling, which meant fewer people going hungry during lean times. Ancient Egypt tells a similar story. Archaeologists have found evidence that vinegar was used there too, both in food and as a kind of early remedy. Here's a fact that surprises a lot of people. In the ancient world, vinegar wasn't seen as waste or failure. It was seen as valuable, sometimes even traded like a proper commodity. But vinegar's story was about to get a lot more dramatic. We move now to ancient Greece. The famous physician Hippocrates, often called the father of modern medicine, is believed to have recommended vinegar for various ailments. Ancient Greek medicine often mixed vinegar with honey, believing the combination could help with coughs and infections. Whether or not it truly worked the way they believed, one thing is clear. Vinegar was trusted. It sat right alongside herbs and other early remedies in the ancient medical toolkit. But if you think vinegar's biggest role was in medicine, wait until you hear about the Roman Empire. Roman soldiers marched across thousands of kilometers, conquering huge parts of the known world. And one of their secret weapons wasn't a sword. It was a drink called Posca. Posca was a mixture of vinegar and water, sometimes with a few herbs added. Roman soldiers drank it daily. It was refreshing. It helped replace lost fluids, and some historians believe the acidity may have helped make questionable water safer to drink. Imagine that. Some of history's most powerful soldiers, marching to build an empire, fueled partly by a diluted vinegar drink. Vinegar also traveled Roman trade routes far and wide. It was used in cooking, in preserving olives and vegetables, and even in some early forms of sauces. By this point in history, vinegar wasn't just a kitchen ingredient anymore. It was becoming part of daily survival across an entire empire. But empires fall. And when Rome collapsed, vinegar didn't disappear with it. We move now into the Middle Ages. Without refrigeration, medieval households relied heavily on preservation. Vinegar became essential for pickling vegetables, preserving meats, and making food last through long, harsh winters. Monasteries once again played an important role, much like they did with beer. Monks experimented with fermentation and preservation techniques, refining vinegar production as part of daily monastery life. Vinegar was also used medicinally throughout the Middle Ages. Some believed it could help ward off illness. During outbreaks of disease, certain communities even used vinegar to clean surfaces, believing it had protective properties. Then came an era of exploration that vinegar would quietly help make possible. Long sea voyages during the age of exploration faced a serious problem. Fresh food didn't last. Fresh water often went bad. Sailors needed ways to preserve supplies for months at sea. Vinegar became a valuable tool on board ships. It helped preserve certain foods longer, and some sailors used diluted vinegar as a way to make stored water more tolerable to drink. Without something as simple as vinegar, some of history's most famous voyages of discovery would have been even more dangerous than they already were. By now, vinegar had touched nearly every major civilization on Earth. But its story was about to change again, thanks to something new. Science. The Industrial Revolution transformed vinegar from a slow, unpredictable kitchen accident into a precise scientific product. Producers began to understand exactly how fermentation worked. Instead of waiting and hoping, they could now control temperature, timing, and ingredients to produce vinegar reliably and at scale. This is when the world truly began to see vinegar diversify. Different regions, using different local ingredients, created their own unique styles. Apple cider vinegar emerged from regions rich in apple orchards. Wine vinegar came from grape-growing areas across Europe. Malt vinegar developed in places brewing beer, made from fermented barley. Balsamic vinegar came from a very specific tradition in parts of Italy, aged for years to develop deep, rich flavor. And white vinegar became a simple, affordable option produced through modern industrial methods. Every culture, using what they had available, created their own version of the same ancient discovery. And once mass production and global trade took hold, vinegar could travel further than ever before. It found its way into kitchens on every continent, including one country where the hot climate and practical lifestyle would turn vinegar into something used in almost every household. That country is Australia. When British settlers arrived in Australia in the late 1700s, they didn't just bring farming tools and building supplies. They brought their food traditions too. And vinegar was part of that everyday life. In the early colony, keeping food fresh was a serious challenge. There was no refrigeration. Supplies could be limited, especially in remote settlements far from any port. Vinegar became one of the most practical tools available. It helped preserve vegetables, fruits, and other foods, allowing families to stretch limited supplies through difficult seasons. Australia's hot climate made this even more important. In the heat, food spoiled faster than it did back in Britain. Settlers quickly learned that vinegar wasn't just useful. In many households, it was essential. Pickling became a common household skill. Families would preserve cucumbers, onions, and other vegetables in vinegar, creating food that could last far longer without spoiling in the heat. Over time, vinegar worked its way into everyday Australian cooking in ways that became second nature. Here's something almost every Australian will recognise. Fish and chips, wrapped up and doused generously in vinegar, became one of the most iconic food combinations in the country. Walk into almost any fish and chip shop across Australia today, and you'll likely see a bottle of vinegar sitting right there on the counter, ready to be poured. It's such a normal part of the experience that most people never stop to think about it. But that simple bottle carries a tradition stretching back thousands of years, all the way to ancient accidental fermentation. As Australian food culture developed, vinegar-based sauces and condiments became staples in home kitchens. Chutneys, pickles, and tangy homemade sauces became common in Australian pantries, often passed down through family recipes. In more recent years, Australia has seen the rise of a small but passionate craft vinegar movement. Independent producers have started making artisan vinegars, often using local apples, wine grapes, or other regional ingredients, similar to how craft brewing transformed the beer industry. These small producers experiment with aging, blending, and flavouring techniques, creating unique Australian vinegars that reflect local produce and local taste. What started as a practical necessity for early settlers has grown into something more refined. Vinegar today sits comfortably in Australian kitchens, from the everyday bottle at the fish and chip shop to boutique artisan blends found at local markets. It's a quiet thread that connects modern Australian cooking back to ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, and every civilization in between. From accidental fermentation in the ancient world, to Roman soldiers marching on Posca, to monks preserving food through harsh winters, to sailors surviving long ocean voyages, to a bottle sitting on a table at a fish and chip shop today, vinegar has quietly traveled beside humanity for thousands of years. From forgotten temples to modern dinner tables, this simple, sour liquid has outlasted empires, survived wars, and found its way into nearly every kitchen on Earth. So here's a question for you. Next time you reach for that bottle of vinegar, will you think about just how far it's traveled to get there? Let me know in the comments.